welcome back everybody. Last session this morning before lunch, attracting creative and digital tech. I'm going to pass over to Mark, our chair. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. You'll be delighted to know we've saved the very best session to the one just before lunch. No disrespect to the great speakers and the energy there was in the room earlier. And I was reflecting on this this topic before the session. We were Chris and I were just talking a little bit about the cultural history of this city region, and we haven't forgotten, but let's just remind ourselves that there is a reason that Liverpool was the England's first capital of culture back in 2008. It's a thing that energized the city region, but it happened because the cultural richness of this place is quite remarkable. It's unlike any other city in the country, probably with the exception of London, for having that richness. Tony opened today's session by talking about Liverpool's the sort of place you come to, and there's always stuff to do when you're finished at 5 o'clock or whatever when you're in the city, and that pervades the city region. So it's something that's incredibly important, and we've put these two things together: creative and digital tech talent, as the subject matter for this discussion. We've always put those two things together. And it's interesting, again, when you travel around the country, not every place does that, perhaps because they don't have the creative richness and the cultural heritage that this place has. But there is a uniqueness to that, genuine. Often we talk in marketing speak about things, but there is a genuine uniqueness about this culture and creative richness that a few people have talked excitedly about the future of Liverpool. I think it's going to be the thing that really drives us and defines us in the future. Hence, you've got the best and most informative panel right at the end of your morning session before lunch. So I'm going to introduce briefly each of our panelists. My name is Mark Basnett, by the way, for those of you who don't know me. I've got the privilege of being the Managing Director of Growth Platform. We run the Inward Investment Agency for the City Region, do high growth and sector development work in conjunction with the combined authority, our local authorities and our business partners for the City Region. Enough from me. Mel, I'm going to turn to you first. Listen, embarrassment of riches. We've only got 30 minutes or so, so we're going to try and rattle through as much as we possibly can. And please, if you've got any questions, either shout them out or use the lunch break to take questions into folks. So, Mel, excitedly got a glimpse inside Shakespeare North through the media in the last couple of days. I don't know if any of you else have seen that. It's been all over media in the last few days. Tell us about your role at Shakespeare North Playhouse and a little bit the role it's playing in the city region's cultural regeneration.
Thanks, Mark. Cheers. Yeah, so I'm Mel. I'm Chief Exec at Shakespeare North Playhouse. And we are a £40 million build and investment in Prescott, which is a town within Liverpool City Region, 23-minute drive away. I've just done it from this very spot. And it's important that we are building a theatre in a town. It's about the regeneration and using creativity and using culture and theatre and art as a catalyst for that change and for that reinvestment. So this building is unique. It's one of its own. You'll all come and get to see it, but it's tremendously historic. So there's 90 tons of English oak that's been built in a cockpit theatre, which was Henry VIII's theatre. And it is, as I say, unique. There's nothing like it in the world. It's based on exact drawings of an Inigo Jones architectural design. It is stunning. There's a calmness about it. There's a beauty about it. And that is to bring internationally renowned theatre to Liverpool City Region. We already have it, so we're just complementing that. But it is about being inspired by Shakespeare, so you will see excellent, world-class Shakespeare on stage in Prescott, a small town, currently a small town. But what we see happening over the next 5 to 10 years will be very exciting in terms of the economic regeneration for that space.
Yeah. Thanks, Mel. You absolutely got to go and see this place and Google the images if you haven't done. But I'm just interested in, you talked about regeneration. Prescott's gone through the immediate vicinities around have gone through a remarkable transformation. But I know that the view is really to get this to reach into the community, isn't it? To involve the community in it. So it genuinely is a regeneration powerhouse for the region.
Absolutely. It is that juxtaposition between a hyper-local and an international. So we've got a strategy that strands both. I always believe that you can't have one without the other. So in terms of the community elements, it is a cultural hub. It's not your traditional theatre. So we'll be open from early in the morning till late at night. And it's creating a safe and democratic space where communities can come in and get involved together. So it will push beyond those boundaries of what you would expect from a theatre. It will be, well-being. We're looking at Tai Chi in our performance garden to help our elders in the community. It is about creating jobs, and that is evident on the high street in Prescott. So we're seeing that now in terms of the economic regeneration. Even before we've opened our doors, we've got less voids than the national average in terms of retail. We've got shops and cafes that are opening, and Northwest renowned restaurants that have already got pre-theatre menus before we've opened our doors. But we are making it democratic, because you say to yourself, well, why Prescott, and why put a theatre in? Why put a theatre in Prescott? And then beyond that, why put a Shakespearean theatre in Prescott? When I get asked that, I am tempted to say, well, why not? Because these things belong to everybody. Shakespeare belongs to everybody. And you may be thinking, I don't want to go and see Shakespeare. I haven't picked that up since GCSE, and I've got no intention of doing so. So what we're doing is we're transforming that, and we want to bring it to people. We've got an initiative called Pay What You Decide. So tickets start from £3. And that means we're breaking down financial barriers, and we're inviting people into that debate to say, come and see if you like it. And if you don't, tell us that you don't. And we'll probably change what we do. So this is truly about community. And then we take that model into our international partners. And then how do we bring creative and international into Prescott and into the Liverpool City region?
If you're not inspired now, you never will be. We all know the famous regeneration stories about the Guggenheim in Bilbao and how that transformed the economic fortunes of that great city. This is going to do the same for the Prescott and Knowsley. There's no doubt about that. The excitement nationally and internationally about this is off the scale, and we're all really proud and excited to be a part of it. So thanks for sharing that. We'll come back if you have any questions on that. Now turn to Geith Mel. Great to have you. Geith is one of our digital and creative board members, so he's part of the infrastructure we have here in the city region to help steer and advise and guide the city region on what matters, where the challenges and where the opportunities and strengths are. So he's also a huge part of what makes our place unique. He's brought and heart of the IBM team that's within the UK STFC facilities at Daresbury. Tell us a little bit more about IBM's research and the main strength that it brings to Liverpool and the city region, some of the projects you're involved in at the moment.
Thanks, Mark. So I'm Geith. We are one half of the Hartree Centre, which is just off Daresbury. I think in the last couple of sessions, a lot of folks mentioned about that. This is a massive investment from the UK government, but also investment from us in IBM, about 20%, in an effort around £200 million over the next 5 years. We specialize on using AI and cloud technologies, especially targeting life sciences and material discovery areas, and also the manufacturing sector, especially around Industry 4.0. And this sort of nicely ties up why we are in the Liverpool Combined Authority area and why we see the value. So for us, it's very important for the effort we have to have specific UK industry partners and the problems that they bring to the table and how we can, as an organization, help them to address these issues. And regarding that, it is exciting for us to be in the region. We are at the moment about 40 plus researchers in Daresbury. With the new investment, we aim to be about twice the size of the team come next year. So we have a huge recruitment drive, and we really after high-skilled talent. And we happen to be in a goal pot in that sense, because we have all the excellent universities, especially around life sciences here in the Liverpool region. But also in terms of material discovery tasks, you have places like Manchester. So this is, in a sense, our excitement and our investment to come to the region and stay, because it enables us to do wide range of tasks. And I'm not going to go expand on the aspects of culture and that vibrancy the area brings, because that helps us attracting new talent. We spoke earlier about skills retention and talent acquisition, and all these things are enabled by the city region. So that's in a sense our mission here.
Great to hear IBM's experience of attracting talent, because that's what this session is principally about. You recently launched the National Centre for Digital Innovation here in the city region. As part of that, are you seeing any lift from that announcement and that extra investment that's come in on the back of that?
Yes, 100%. As I said, on the back of that investment, we'll probably grow twice the size of the team. And typically, historically, IBM research has really thrived in mainland US. This amount of researchers that we're going to have here in the UK, and especially in the Northeast, focusing on some of the tasks around material discovery and life sciences and industry 4.0 will be massive even for our organization, and that represents a larger footprint for IBM research. So yes, for sure.
Great, thanks, Keith. We talk to businesses every day of the week, and the three challenges that businesses throw to are pretty much universally. It's net zero. Encouragingly, businesses are absolutely on that journey now from a net zero point of view. It's digitization and its skills. And it's invaluable to us in the city region that we've got probably the UK, arguably one of the world's leading companies and scientific capability right in the heart of the city region, driving our capability of digitizing businesses in a smart way to make them more productive. So massively important that we've got you here in the city region, and the fact that your name attracts talent is brilliant and important to us. So we've talked two ends of the spectrum here of creative and digital. We've had the cultural side from Mel, and the really high-end digital and tech side from Keith. Karen, you probably embody a combination of those two things in a wonderful, most of you I'm sure will be aware of what's happened in the Baltic quarter of the city over the course of the last 10 years, a remarkable story. Can you tell us a little bit about that story and your experience in it, please, Mel? Karen, sorry.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Karen Bedder. I'm a board member at the Baltic Creative CIC. For those of you who know the Baltic well, you will probably have heard Mark talk about it. And once Mark, not this Mark, sorry, Mark RMD, who's just left. And once he got started, you couldn't stop him. So I'm hoping to keep my my little talk about it slightly shorter. But the Baltic, for those of you who don't know it, is in inner South Liverpool. It was a incredibly rundown industrial area. But 13 years ago, actually, now the Baltic Creative CIC. Took over a number of derelict buildings, and initially with some grant funding, redeveloped those buildings and set about trying to create an area for the creative and digital community in Liverpool. And it is a CIC, it's a community interest company, and that's been a brilliant and necessary part of the journey, because whilst we are fundamentally a property company, what we have been trying to create in the Baltic, and what I think we've successfully created in the Baltic, is a community, and a community that people want to be part of. And we have spaces for the smallest, for literally one-person artist spaces. The biggest space we have is about 4,000 square feet. But what we do, and we do very regularly, is we move all those creatives and digital businesses around the spaces. One of the things we found over the last 3 years, particularly and during the pandemic, was that not everybody needed the same space and everybody needed different space, but we've always, because we're a community interest company, been able to work on the basis of flexibility. So if people come to us and tell us they don't need the size of space that they need anymore, or that they need bigger space, or they need smaller space, we're able and willing to actually change the spaces that they occupy, and we don't hold them to the length of their lease that they might otherwise have originally taken up. So flexibility is a huge part of what we are able to offer, and one of the main reasons I think that we've been so successful at attracting the creative and digital sector into that space and to develop that community, because we can grow with them, they can grow with us, and we can change that space depending on what they need. We're also, we've also, I think one of the things that we have done more recently as well is we've been asked we're being asked on a regular basis to try and have a much more inclusive rental offer. I think, obviously everyone's aware at the moment that energy prices are going through the roof, and we are having our tenants come to us and talk to us about whether or not they can agree an inclusive rate to occupy our space, because they want to know what they're going to pay, and they want to know how that's going to be. And we're looking at that, and we have a lot of inclusive rents already, and we're definitely taking that on board, because I think if we need to work with them, and as I say, as a CIC, we can do that. We can actually change some of the ways that we operate and try and keep that community in place in that area.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. For those of you not familiar with it, it's kind of Shoreditch is well, again, a London example of an area that's organically evolved, driven by the business community, facilitated by the public sector. Probably the perfect example of how regeneration should work is what's happened. And the latest investment by the public sector, backed by the combined authority and supported by the city, will be a train station for that. But that's going to create challenges, I guess, ultimately, in this almost how managing success, because you say you have been massively successful in growing organically, but attracting talent and businesses into that environment, a place that was described by the Sunday Times as the coolest place to live in the UK in 2017. How are we going to manage that growth and the success? How do we permeate it further across the city region?
Yeah, I mean, the success comes, like she said, comes with it some slight challenges for us, in the sense that rents are going up in that area, and actually, sometimes, people are moving into the area, which actually is great in lots of ways. But actually, I think some people may have known of there's some little battles going between the residents and the businesses that are there, particularly the ones that are open late into the evening. It's that kind of gentrification of an area that actually was developed and was quite cool and funky, and people are moving it. There are some challenges around that. And it's challenging in the sense that the rental values have gone up and the property values have gone up. So, it's interesting when we look at buying our next building or our next place to have in that area. But actually in 2019, just before the pandemic, we did announce a new strategy for the Baltic, and we are looking at developing our Baltic brand and our Baltic offering out into the wider Liverpool City region. And we're talking to Southport, and we're talking to Halton, and we're hoping to bring a little bit of Baltic to other areas of the Liverpool City region as well.
So it's a great success story, and one I think that's going to continue both in that site, because there is still space to invest and develop there, but also taking it right across the city region, because the demand is so great. A huge success story. Chris, I'd like to, we were talking, weren't we, a little bit of history. We both kind of date ourselves, start of our careers around the 80s, and reflecting on the change that's happened in this place. We're in a building that was very old in the 1980s, but tell us a little bit. Liverpool is synonymous with film, for those who know it, and those certainly of those. Tell us a little bit about how the film industry is growing in Liverpool, and the work you're doing to attract production companies and staff. The bottom one there, yeah. You're on.
That's it. I think it's always interesting to me, because in some ways film is not the growth sector. It is the television sector that is driving so much of the growth here and in other cities, and actually, cities around the world. High-end television is actually the game in town, and there's a very good reason for that, which is film, in a way, is that wonderful thing. It's the last of the traveling circuses, which is that film tends to go where actually it has various tax incentives and all sorts of factors drive it across the world, whereas television, in a way, is the most sustainable business. And there's a very good reason for that, which is television tends to come to somewhere, it shoots for 3 months at a time instead of a feature film that might come and shoot for 4 weeks. If you're very lucky, you get returning series. We've been very lucky in the last 12 months because we did 2 series, Time, which people may have seen on BBC One, and Responder. We did another series, actually, which was Cress as well, which was the city standing in for London and Berlin. And all 3 of those shows have been recommissioned by their various broadcasters. So for us, that's the real win, is actually we do those first shows and then we get more of it and we get more of it and we get more of it. So television, in a way, is what has been driving the sort of this amazing sort of growth spurt that we've seen in this sector. We're one of those businesses that we feel sort of slightly guilty because in some ways we thrived during the pandemic, because of course during the pandemic people needed to watch lots of content. And once we'd sort of got over the hurdle of the initial lockdown and the government had put in place an indemnity scheme, because insurance was the biggest issue for us, because obviously you can't shoot unless you can be insured. Actually, we shot all the way through more or less that pandemic. And of course, film crews loved it because there was nobody on the streets. So they didn't have to deal with sort of having to close roads in the laneway and everything like that. So it was extremely thick. But the key issues for us going forward, and I would emphasize that Liverpool has certain natural advantages. I talked about them, I think, last night, in terms of locations, fantastic offer through the Liverpool City Council Film Office. It's people, because I still think that is the thing that drives people to come to Liverpool, is its people, its vibe, it's all those creative energy that it has. But the challenges that it has to retain its position are quite simple. One of which is about infrastructure. And by infrastructure, I mean as much human infrastructure as I mean physical infrastructure, because our industry is going through a huge problem with skills and labour at the moment. There was a report that came out at the beginning of this week, which is that it's reckoned that to maintain the sort of, the levels of growth that we've seen, we need another 25,000 full-time people over the next 3 years. So skills is going to become the biggest issue for us going forward. And of course, within that also plays to the other factors around diversity, inclusion, particularly social, as well as all the other sorts of bits. So that's one of the great challenges of just going forward, is how do we bring forward more trained people? Otherwise, we will start to have problems with our positioning. And the other one is studios. And I'll let John talk a bit more about that in a moment, because that's much better his game than mine. But the key thing about studio space is that it obviously provides throughput. And that's where you build your more sustainable offer in terms of skills, because actually you get productions going through and people train on those productions. You get lots of other businesses clustering around it, post-production, production equipment, all those sorts of things. And one of the things that we are most concerned with is about reducing leakage. Terrible word, I know, leakage, but actually that is one of the key things, because there is no point in having a $32 million TV show come to the region, and because it cannot source its facilities here or source its labour, only spending 20% of that budget. That is where our challenge is. How do we get them to spend more? And that will ultimately depend on us having the infrastructure. So it's all about chicken and egg and placemaking and all those sorts of things. But I think that's where we're very much focused over the next few years, is how do we capture more of the value of incoming production. We also want to build up our own production internally, because as you and I talked about, the things that are most successful for us are not only the ones that come into town, but the ones that are culturally specific to the region, because millions of people around the world see Liverpool in all its glory, all its good glory and its less good glory. That's the biggest tool for us. So for us, it's about a cultural branding as much as it is about the hard nails economic on the ground spend or jobs and things like that.
Perfectly described. Thanks, Chris. Well, listen, it's an entertainment for us Scousers to, and I get my kids to do this, to try and spot the Liverpool buildings and landmarks in films, and
I got told off last night for not showing a still of Batman on top of the Liver building. So they told me off. You show that still.
Yeah. I think everybody saw Batman standing on the top of the Liver building. But my kids are all gone through the Harry Potter generation, seeing the tunnels and stuff like that. So, but what you've described, and I'd convert that negative word of leakage into positive words about place and embedding. And I'm going to come to you in a sec, John, because that's exactly what you're doing. We're all focused on place. It's become very popular in a term, but it's absolutely right that we have to think about. It's great to have these wonderful films and point to them to your kids, but unless we lock in the commercial growth and the livelihood opportunities for our people, we're not going to achieve the real economic value, which is setting you up perfectly, John, because that's exactly what you guys are doing. So.
Fantastic. So for those who maybe missed it earlier, Tony showed a CGI of what we're doing. It's a 300,000 square foot world-class film and TV hub on the main arterial route into the city centre from the motorway network. I think Tony's heard that presentation from me that many times that he does it better than I do now. But the question that kind of was asked was, how are we designing something that attracts creative businesses? And funnily enough, that's not actually the problem we have. We could have let the space 2 or 3 times over without doing any marketing, just literally from companies approaching us direct. We're already 62% pre-let with Twickenham Studios, who are the oldest studio operator in the UK, and then a local university who are providing a full FEHE offer. So why is it so attractive? Well, actually, to be fair, Chris sat next to me. The film office have been here 30 years. And Chris said very modestly yesterday that it's the best film office in the UK. And actually, to be fair, I've heard that from senior people in the industry, not direct from the council. But we're working on the kind of 30 years of history of excellent kind of film office work done in the city. So the city's really well known to senior figures in the industry, big businesses, that they all want to come and be here and locate here. We don't have any problems attracting businesses. The problem we have, which Chris touched on as well, is skills. We're creating 4,000 jobs. And what we don't want is to just see people imported into the city to fill those jobs and for them not to actually benefit the people in the city region who desperately need those opportunities. So for us, that's why the critical part of this scheme was to get that kind of education anchor into the development so that we've got that proper FEHE offer. You can come to the site and be retrained, upskilled, reskilled, and put into employment in a sector which for the last decade has grown at about 25% per annum, which is more than the UK has grown as a whole over the 10-year period. So it's growing every year more than the UK economy grows in a decade, which is phenomenal growth. And as Chris says, that's really the high-end TV part of the market that's driving that. So we've got a sector that's booming. We want to make sure that those skills, that the kind of great jobs that we're creating are available to people in the local area. And I think for us, the last step on that journey is to make sure that kids in our city region who are currently really disengaged with education are aware of the really broad skills that are needed to facilitate filming. And that can be carpentry, electrics, for set building, all the way through to kind of the really kind of high skilled stuff around camera operation and all of that. There's something for everyone in this industry, and there's fantastic social mobility. So we're then doing a kind of an outreach program called it's called the Media Brainery, where we'll go into local schools. And I actually did the first one a few weeks ago, going into a construction college, talking to kids doing carpentry and electrics about the prospect of doing set building carpentry and set building electrics, and how that actually they can be reskilled, and when this building lands, there's a job opportunity for them in a fantastic sector that's booming. So I think that's the critical issue for us, is skills.
Which kind of perfectly brings us back to the theme of this session, which is attracting talent. Now, I've got a couple of questions here that can ask the folks, and particularly around skills, and I'll come to everyone, but just to give it an opportunity if there's any burning questions that any of you have got before I kind of turn to the questions here. The laptop is the tablet's gone blank. So if there's any Slido questions, I haven't got them because they're not on there.
Can I just make one other really important point? Because we talk a lot about skills, quite rightly, because it's the stuff that gets made. But the other thing that's really, really important, particularly in my sector, is what we would call above the line talent. Because we have above the line, we have below the line. It's just the way in which we divide it up. And above the line is effectively writers, directors, producers in front of camera. And ultimately, they are the wealth curators, because ultimately they come up with the ideas and they are the top creative team. And I think a city and a region which focuses in one area below the line, craft skills, all those things, but doesn't pay attention also to that above the line, is ultimately shooting itself in the foot, because that's actually what we need as a city to be equally developing, is the next generation of those writers, directors and producers, particularly, and I will put this all out for producers, because producers often get a bum rap in this, and you see it on most films because it has something like 20 producers on it. Back in the day when I started off, it was one producer, but it seems to have sort of grown with everybody and their mates. But actually, producers are about really keeping that talent in the city region. And that's what we really need going forward, is we need a whole range of producers. We've been developing some of them on the shows that we funded through the fund and so on, because ultimately they will keep the value in the city region. So I'll put that shout out. And I think it's true in theatre. I think it's true in all those things. We need really, really good entrepreneurial producers. And when we find them, we need to keep them and not let them brain drain elsewhere.
Yeah, please, Mel.
Totally resonates with me as well in terms of the conversations that we're having. So in building a theatre like this, it's not just about attending the theatre and bringing that economic. It is about what are we doing with very young people to help them understand the stagecraft behind what we put on the stage. It's the same in film as well. So we've got studio space, and the reason why we want studio space is so that we can nurture that talent from a very early age. One of the first things that you will see on the stage in Shakespeare Playhouse is actually a writers' competition, and it's a young writers' competition, and the winners are three young women, 11 through to 17, and they will be able to have their theatres, what they've written in terms of their storytelling, that will be produced on stage for them. And when we were showing Johnny Vegas around, because he's doing one of our first evenings with. And he's great, Johnny. And he said, far better than ever I could, he said, this is taking culture back. This is where we keep creativity in the north. We breed talent here. Let's keep talent here. And I think it's that almost keeping it within the Liverpool City region and giving those children that platform to understand that this is a job that you can do. It's a sustainable career. And then how do we then give them that platform almost? But yeah, totally resonate with that.
I'm just looking to see if there are any new questions, and there's nothing come from Slido. There's nothing from the others. I'm mindful we're still trying to finish for around 12:30. I know we started a few minutes late, so I just kind of want to bring this session to a close. A point to a question and closing comments from each of you. What does the city region need to do? We've heard some fantastic successes, and it is inspiring to be here. We were reflecting on the difference in 30 years, which is just unbelievable, and you can see it actually in the legacy of film and TV images. But what do we need to go to the next level, the next stage? I'll start, and we'll start with you, Guy.
Okay, I think we touched on this topic. I think it's probably targeted investment. I think Catherine earlier spoke about having the ability to decide on the R&D spend. So we already spoke about creative sector, but if you look at digital sector, it's again the same. I hope UK government investing £170 million for next 5 years with us shows a promise in the digital sector for us. But also we would really like to work with small and medium-sized companies. For us to do that, those organizations also need some targeted investments. So I sit on the digital and creative board, and one of the things that we do every 3 months, we look at the facts and the figures for the Liverpool City Region. So we turn around about 1.7 billion worth of revenue, and we have about 18,000 jobs and 7,000 organizations. So it's about whether you take creative separate or digital separate or combined, it's about 90% of that tend to be less than 5 people in the organizations. So we can develop really nice technologies and tech, but you also need these smaller companies and the talent to acquire that new knowledge and propel the city region. So I think targeted investment is probably one of the key things.
We talked about words. Diffusion is a big word in the city region right now. It's exactly what you've talked about, Pete, isn't it? We've got the technology and the capability. It's making sure that long tail of small and medium-sized businesses absorb that and drive productivity and grow on the back of it. So completely.
So I think in terms of, from our point of view, in terms of being a property company, I think that one of the things that we want to do in terms of trying to keep that creative and digital tech in the area, in the areas that we operate, is that we want to own those buildings so that we can give those businesses that stability so that they can grow within our, if we're leasing, if we are as a property company ourselves are leasing space, we can't actually give that continuity and that consistency and allow that development to in the same way that we can if we own those buildings. As a community interest company, if we can keep those properties and keep growing and allow our tenants to grow with us, we can give them that security and that surety that they can stay in those spaces, and so they can then grow. They can grow their talent, and everyone can grow together.
And presumably creating a Baltic in Southport, and in Wirral and in Halton. That's probably going to work as well, isn't it?
That would work too, yeah.
No.
I'm going to take 2 if I can. I'll have 2. I'll be greedy. One being education. It really links into what we just said. Education in early years in terms of the careers that you could possibly have within the creative and the tech sector. I think that's fundamental, not just above the line but below the line, not just front of house but back of house and stagecraft. We need to be educating our youngsters on what is out there and what's available, and then giving them the tools to be able to do that. So investment in the education of that, so investment in the teachers, investment in the schools infrastructure, and getting digital and tech in the homes of those children, I think is vital. I think the second one for me would be how we look and how we treat as a society arts and culture, and how that leads into investment for digital and tech. Then before COVID, we maybe took arts and culture a little bit for granted, and I would say we use the language of subsidising the arts, and that's hugely frustrating. We need to change that language into investing in the arts, because we've all talked about today about how it's got a return on investment in so many ways: economic, social, just our own mental well-being and how we feel as humans. But it makes it a democratic space. It leads into that inclusion point. So I would say if we could just switch that language from subsidising arts and culture into investment in arts and culture, and talking about what that investment then means, we're halfway there.
And if anyone wants to invest in Shakespeare North Playhouse, I'm sure Mel would be very, very pleased to speak with you over.
I think for me, 2 things again, which I think are kind of echoing the same themes, which is space and skills. For me, Littlewood should be the first phase of many, many phases in that area where we create a proper cluster of film and TV skills and space, both sitting alongside each other, because we have all of the other raw ingredients to make that sector a really incredible growth sector for the city region. But we need space and we need skills.
Chris?
I suppose we all want more investment. I suppose what I would say is actually, ideally, I want that investment to come from long-term national and international market partners. That's the key bit for me, because actually, if you look around the UK, the cities that have really pushed ahead in a lot of these areas are ones that have received an awful lot of support from broadcaster infrastructure. I think of obviously Media City and Manchester, what that did, what's happened in Cardiff, particularly off the back of a show like Doctor Who. I can start to see it already happening in Birmingham, largely because obviously Birmingham's got HS2. So to me, that's what Liverpool lacks at the moment. It lacks that big international market partner, be that a Netflix, be that an Amazon, be that a Sky, I don't know, be that a new version of Channel 4, whatever that will be. So to me, that is potentially the transformational thing that maybe the city will need. And that's what I would ultimately like to see.
Thanks, Chris. You've heard very, very eloquently, we have the building blocks here. We've achieved a huge amount in this creative and digital sector over the course of the last 10, 13, 20 years or so. This is a place that's unquestionably it's primed for investments. I think you're absolutely right, Chris. I think we're ready for that international commercial investment. And one of the things we'll be doing, and we're looking for all of your help in this, for having what you've heard today, is take that message out to, whether it's at a dinner party or a business meeting or whatever, when you're representing folks or you're hearing things, you're picking up intelligence from the marketplace. Let us know, tell them about what's happening in this city region, how remarkable it is, how primed it is for investment, because it really is unique and immense. And we are on the cusp of something very, very exciting here. So I think my ask to you, thank you for being such a great audience, but my ask to you is take that away and work with us to try and find the global partners that Chris was talking about there. We could go on for much longer. If you're ever asked to chair a panel, make sure you get a bloody brilliant one. And so can I say a huge thank you to this great panel, and would I ask you to just show your appreciation for them. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. We're going to move into our closing keynote session now. Now, unfortunately, we do have apologies from Steve Turner, who is really disappointed, but he is very unwell today, so is unable to join us. But we are delighted that we have John Cummins, Managing Director for Group Investments at Aviva, with us. And John has been instrumental in shaping investor activity across the region. So, John, we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.